Quickly. Our next guest is rolled up, and that'll be awesome. Hrvoje Moric is the host of Geopolitics and Empire,
Nice.
TNT Radio. Fantastic show, and I think we've all been on it. I think
Good man.
so. And yeah, it's just I was on last night. Really good conversation. He's up early. And so let's pick on him a little bit.
Good morning.
Subway.
What's going on? I'm all TNT'd out. I got my shirt, I got my mug. So
check off your advertising moments. Got it. Boom. Your obligations. Boom. Done.
Yeah, we don't have to stop every 15 minutes for 2 minutes on this one. It's going to be weird for you.
He goes, hi, I'm Roche. I work for TNT. I don't know if I told you guys that.
yeah. Good. I'm waiting for
how
the
do
break.
you say your name, by the way? Please.
Hrvoje.
I told you. I was
Three syllables. Kind of like Hrvoje. Literally means Croat. I'm proud to be a Croatian. So.
Nice. It's good to see you again, man.
Way to run away from your Mexican heritage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's your middle name? You got a Mexican middle name, so we can call you that.
No.
Damn.
I'm working on that.
It's like Milos or something like that.
Have you ever been to Mexico?
He lives in Mexico.
Yeah, I'm living in Mexico. Yeah.
What part?
Guadalajara.
Really? No
if
shit.
If you're ever passing through, stop by. I'm a Mexican national. 5 years ago, I became naturalized. So
Nice.
Proud Mexican too.
Are you familiar with Derek Bros?
Oh yeah, I was hanging out with him at the Great Reset a couple months back. Yeah, it was fun.
He's working on a project in Mexico too. Like, if you guys should connect. You know, I think he's got a community going on there
in Morelia. He's got an end of the world community.
Right.
Agora.
Right.
And a great article that he just dropped on T-Lab about the GMOs and AMLO saying no to the white corn.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, they mostly use white corn. They're saying no to the GMO corns that are coming in from America. And
right.
They're a little bit
and
pissed
the
off.
U.S. government, which is that's the crazy part of the story, is that the U.S. government is actively on the surface going like, you have to do this.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we see like all these discussions of invasion and
Exactly.
oh my God, the cartels, and we need to pass legislation to invade them. It's like, gee, come on.
They don't like AMLO, man,
and
because he's always been like a little bit more like he's a different type of politician. I think they don't like him mostly because he's nationalized their lithium, and that's like, what are you doing? That's corporation lithium, right. You bastards. So,
he's a bad guy because he doesn't give it hands willing over to the real bad guys, right? But I mean, I think we've seen this coming. I said the same thing about Bolivia before it happened. It's not hard to see this stuff coming. They're just like, it's just on the surface where they're, somebody who goes afoul of, whether it's a gold reserve currency or something like that, which is a classic concept, or these days lithium. It's just so obvious.
He's been on a roll though, not just lithium. Just like a week or two ago, he bought out the electricity production. So now CFE, the public electricity utility, now owns a monopoly like 56%. So the government owns 56% of electricity production, which is pretty cool because I always joke my water bill annually in Mexico is $50 a year for the water utility. Wow. And then electricity is like maybe between $5 and $10 a month. And so, he's taking hold of electricity, of the lithium, the petroleum. You guys mentioned the corn, and I've even talked to Mexicans here that are working class Mexicans that are traditionally conservative, and they're like, yeah, he's the least worst Mexican president we've had since I can remember.
So, I like that.
He got the uniform on for the World Baseball Classics, was on TV every day, so he kind of like normalized himself, but he did put himself up for getting fired. He had a referendum. He says, I'm going to put up a referendum halfway through my term, 3 years. I'm going to vote. You think I'm doing a good job? I'll stay. If you think I'm doing a bad job, we'll have snap elections and we can elect somebody else. And as soon as he won that, he came out of that, it seemed like guns a-blazing, right? Now we're going to get some shit done. So that's been very, very interesting. AMLO addresses this. He addresses he goes on TV every day. He addresses the nation and he talks every single day. He could seem, and my Spanish, I'm just still picking up words. I'm not firing back. I'm doing my best. I'm studying. I got my cue cards around here. But, he seems very slow, methodical, and boring. But at least he's addressing the crowd. And it seems like he's speaking from his own mental state, not Joe Biden getting pumped in.
Let me ask you guys something. This is an interesting dynamic right now because I mean, and this is kind of a crux of a lot of geopolitical, nationalism versus globalism, and so what's interesting is so from an objective perspective, not like somebody who might. Well, let's just put it this way. So AMLO is taking control of these things. So let's just say the government of Mexico. Now that can be concerning, and it should be, unless in this case, it seems that you believe he's got good intentions, and maybe he does. I mean, it seems that way, right? But it's interesting that you can see a justification for doing that because of foreign policy by outside parties, right? Like the same reason you have like Russia and China who won't allow US aid in the country. Regardless of what you think of those countries, everybody can understand why that makes sense, right? These are Trojan horse, it's meant to do something other than the stated purpose. So it's obvious that it's in AMLO's best interest to control these things because there's outside forces like we see with the GMOs trying to control that. But at what point does that become concerning if it gets too centralized? Or even right now, right? Because in another sense, you see that governments centralizing control over things like that can almost always throughout history lead to a problem. So I just want your thoughts on that. It's an interesting kind of,
And AMLO's not going to be there forever, too, as well.
Exactly.
That's another important thing. Go ahead.
It's already becoming concerning because, again, a few weeks ago, it just reported that the Mexican military, they got, this was Proceso, one of the main like Mexican, geopolitical outlets, reporting how the Mexican military's got a bunker now where they're illegally now spying on us Mexicans using, the Israeli Pegasus spyware software. And the military now is being given extra powers with no oversight. So it's like the military can go around. I think most recently was that they can detain people like unconstitutionally. So it's already like kind of freak out territory. And when AMLO leaves, if you get one of these crazy like Calderons or these like right parties, which are they basically work for their corporations and their puppets. Exactly. Where does Calderon go when he's going to teach at Harvard? He's a total CIA asset. And I've interviewed Jefferson Morley, fantastic journalist who wrote the book Our Man in Mexico, how numerous Mexican presidents were literally CIA agents with the code names Litempo. And so it's already starting to freak me out.
I do have to say, though, that, and there's two things. Number one, that I think AMLO doesn't have complete control of his military and whatnot. There's always going to be parts of it that, have been there for quite some time. They have a continued relationship with the military, the United States government over here. We saw that. I think there's a lot of people. I mean, at one point, I think he replaced, in Tijuana, the guards that were there, the old guards that were there, like the federalities were kind of pulled out, and he implemented this other type of force that was like supposed to be more friendlier and open to the people. And I think it was something that was going a little back and forth between him and the little jab at the military. But as reasons why a lot of these times people get elected and they want, a little bit more governmental control over the corporations. And I can remember this when I did go to Nicaragua and I was speaking to somebody. I'm like, well, why are you supporting the Sandinistas? Why are you, going to vote for them this weekend? They were like, we told them, you come in here, you give us infrastructure, you build a road, we'll vote for you. And they got this trust and this dependency on the government where they see the government working for them. Now, that is the problem when you pass it on to the next guy. It's always going to be scary. But I think that's why you do see a lot more of sometimes in Latin America, people standing behind these governments, especially this leftist governments, where their left is more economics and they want to give more to the people and less control to the individuals and the corporations. That's why you see this sometimes.
That's interesting. I often ask this question, like, okay, so, there's this weird inverse in world politics versus US where you've got the left that's being perceived as this wild, lunatic, crazy situation, which I think is obviously, that is happening, but it's not every single person as always. But then and then the right being perceived and framed as the one kind of like trying to bring the sanity back. But even right now, even Kim Iverson just tweeted about this, how it seems this already is kind of shifting where we've got this very serious conservative right now all of a sudden being this, and we're going right back to the other side. It's a teeter-totter we always talk about. But in world politics, it's interesting because you can make a fair argument, and this shouldn't be perceived as the left-right paradigm in this country. It's very different that you can see these left governments like Evo Morales in Bolivia and other places like in Libya with Gaddafi, these groups that were, or rather, I actually don't remember where he actually pegged in anyway, the point is more specifically, you could point at places like Venezuela and so on. The bottom line being that they are fighting against this empirical force that's clearly trying to abuse them with their foreign policy. And, whether good and bad, whatever, that is the part of it. And then you got the right governments that seem to side with the corporations and more so with the foreign policy. So is the dynamic in the United States just simply designed or being driven that way to make us perceive foreign politics a different way? Broad question, but I just think it's an interesting thing to think about.
My man, you want to go on that first?
I was just gonna say I'm biased because I'm a conservative and a Nick Cave fan. I like what Nick Cave said in an unheard interview recently. He said in 2023 to be a rebel, you go to church and you be a conservative. That was hilarious.
Which is okay. Let's unpack that for a second.
I was just saying that.
You
lightly.
woke somebody up over there. Go ahead, man.
And I love Nick Cave. Dude. I've seen Nick in the Bad Seeds a number of times. I think
too,
that little closeout scene at the what is it? The Coward Robert Ford, the assassination of Jesse James film. Right at the very end of it, there's a guy with a guitar and he's singing the song about Jesse James and Robert Ford. That's Nick Cave. So anyway, it's just but it's such an obvious counter narrative. Like it's just such, if you want to fight the power, you're going to go to the traditional centers of organized power and vote Republican. Like,
back and forth.
Okay. I mean, come on.
It is the teeter-totter, right?
It is.
But here's the thing, too. The last time that Anya Parampel was on my show, Steve, were you done? I'm so sorry, brother. I didn't want to.
It's just life's little irony that the counterculture is now, let's go make ourselves a Rockwell painting.
Yeah. And we are talking about the teeter-totter. I call it the clown car going in one ear at the other. The only reason I was a Democrat was at one point was the Iraq War, where I was like, these guys are fucking crazy. The Wolfowitzes and shit.
And that's how it
preemptive attack.
Right.
You had to be a Democrat. Then all of a sudden, some of your Democratic people started saying shit where you were like, we're going along with that. And then you're like, oh, wait a second, I'm out. But let me just say this much, too. The last time Anya Parampel was on my show, and one of the last questions we asked her was, and we wanted to, from what we've seen, we witnessed this, too, as well. Is there a difference between a right-winger in the United States and a right-winger in Latin America? And it was like, oh, hell yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Because here's the thing, but people don't understand. The left in Latin America is socially conservative. They're left in their economics, right? They when they talk about the proletariat, they talk about old school Marx. It's all economical. They're very religious. They pray on Sunday. They, don't believe in gay marriage. They don't like abortion. They don't even want to legalize marijuana. You know what I'm saying? They are socially conservative. It's only here in America where you get your conservatism versus your right versus left being cultural stuff, the cultural issues. And it has nothing that they want nothing to fucking do with it down below, down in Latin America. They're like, oh, hell no. Like, that's your own shit. What happens in our family is our business. The state's not taking over what we're doing inside the house here. So that's why when we had Sarah Higdon on the show the other day, and we talk about when people just throw the Marxist thing out there, the cultural Marxism. It's like that didn't even come from Marx. It's all different. It's so different down in Latin America than it is over here, because a lot of those right wingers, they are sponsored, like anti-government, coming from murder death squads, corporations, hardcores, what I'm saying, getting weapons from the United States and using them on their people. Right. So that's why it's so different. But you know what? I suspect you're going to see a little swing over there too as well. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think the crux of the problem comes from it's an American hubristic kind of it's hubris. Like, we apply our lenses on everything around the world and force everybody else to see through the way we perceive things. That's kind of the crux of the point, is that they're different. It's just not the same thing. We just force it through our lens, right? And I think you're right, though. I think that it still has an influence on world politics just because that's the power structure. But I think the main point is that it's just not the same thing. And you've got people over here. Like, I think my point was that I wonder whether or not we're being played using our dynamic to force us to see people who may actually be trying to use political structures to achieve freedom and independence from an overbearing foreign policy, And so then it makes the people who are doing that look like the bad guy, because you're aligning them with these lunatics at the two-party paradigm level of the left, and meanwhile, there's plenty of left people that perceive themselves that way in this country that see through the two-party paradigm, or see through, they may call themselves progressives. Then you got the patriots on the other side. They're starting to back away from the two-party paradigm, but they're still tapping into it, you know.
The whole China thing, it's like people don't even understand China. They're looking through it through our lens. It's like, you gotta, you know, I'm not saying that they're the Boy Scouts over there and that we should be praising them and going with their model or anything like that, but you're just looking at it through an American lens. You don't even understand what the fuck's going on over there. So, you know.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think when you were on my TNT show last year, Pasta. I mean, that was I think what you just explained was very good, and it was the first time I heard anyone kind of put it out there like that, and it's pretty accurate. And unfortunately, I think in Mexico they did a poll recently of guns. You know, how many Mexicans would like to have gun laws made more lax? And well, if you believe the survey, like 70% said no, we want guns restricted. And I'm like, guys, come on, we've got narcos running all over the place. Actually, one of my ex-colleagues from Detective Monterrey, where I used to teach, he recently disappeared for like 2 or 3 days. Posters on the bridges, and thankfully he reappeared. Some people said it was a secuestro express, like express kidnapping. And so I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. And I just, my comment on the left-right thing is, as Pasta was saying, I think part of it is every country has had a different historical dynamic, in terms of development, economy, politics, culture. And so things are kind of messed up. But as you guys were saying, the left-right paradigm, like the circus, I never really bought into it. But the 2020, the COVID-19 84 fake pandemic, that's when it was like a nuclear bomb that I'm done completely with politics in every country. And I got 3 citizenships, Croatia, USA, Mexico. And it's like in any of those countries where I was living in Kazakhstan, it's like left, right, it doesn't matter. It's globalists versus anyone not globalist, and whatever you want to put there, sovereignty. And they've penetrated all the cabinets, as everyone says, what Klaus Schwab says. I was talking to, here in Jalisco, the state of Jalisco, Alfaro, our governor, total globalist. I can show you with like the white papers of their own government. He's here. We get Rockefeller financing here. I'm living in a freaking smart city, Nuevo León. Samuel Garcia. This guy's bringing the Tesla factory there. He was hanging out with Schwab. He wants to censor free speech. He wants to take away everyone's cars in Nuevo León. I was just talking to someone in Yucatan who said their governor in Yucatan, fully globalist captured. So it's just like now we're in world government. So it's basically globalism versus anyone. And there's very few people remaining to fight the globalists, sadly.
Right. Exactly. Well, what's interesting is that we didn't even get to the second half of what Josh's thread was getting into, which was that ESG overlap, right? Where they're essentially creating. I mean, if you just cut to the chase, is that all that stuff with the stuff that I was probably misrepresenting ultimately on there is that they're going forward into the situation where they're using the ESG, which is interesting because we see this happening with Bud Light and all these other companies that are undermining their own business model to push something that clearly the people that buy their product don't want to see. And it's being forced on them, like even to the point to where it seems like it's not like people are arguing that they're being given a benefit to do so. But I think we just saw how they just went right back. And here's our pro-American ad with horses, and forget what we just talked about. It's clear that they are being hit. They lost 50% of draft sales. Think about how crazy that is. So the ESG thing it's to their detriment, and still they're doing it. So there's a huge multinational pressure coming from around the world from this globalist kind of agenda, and it's driving large businesses to undermine their own business. Like, think about what kind of pressure that must be. That's crazy.
Although, did you see Budweiser's like new display at Walmart?
No, what is it?
Oh my God. Okay, let me bring it up here real quick. And then if you want, we can pull up the last little bit of Josh's thread too. But so Bud Light, not to be overly embarrassed, they really did. They ran into a Walmart and they're like, everybody ignore all the gay shit. We totally smash real pussy and blow people up, because there you go. That's real. That's real.
Sad attempt to, like, this is how stupid they think you are, right-leaning people, that they can just go, guns and military in America, buy our beer again. Okay, we love you.
Yeah,
again.
but it works.
I mean, to some degree it does. But my point is that most people are like,
Budweiser's back again. Brian, what are you talking about?
Like, you know what's funny though? I bet you there are those people online right now doing that. And if you see them, understand that they're not your friend and they're dishonest and they're doing it because they have a motivation and it's advantageous to them to be on that side. But I mean, have you seen the commercial, Steve? That's what I was talking about. The Clydesdales and running in front of these big monuments. And it's just like, it's just pathetic, like at least come out and address the point. Anyway, I think it's hilarious that they think we're this easily swayed. And I think it's they're losing. I don't think it's working.
And we know there's plenty other cheap beers that taste like piss on the market. You don't need to go with Bud Light anymore.
Buy some Mexican beers, and I was just gonna comment.
You're gonna support the cartels? Get out of here.
That's where that goes, right? Exactly.
Come on now.
Stop eating guacamole and avocados. There's an article recently, like Forbes published, that said, "Don't eat avocados. You're supporting." I mean,
cartels.
well, how many American products support Ukraine war and whatever? So
what about California avocados? It's like that's a huge.
Well, you gotta get the Haas ones.
Right? No, dude.
God.
Dude, I was talking about
avocados are
yesterday.
easy as shit to grow.
Yeah. I know. There's the thing with the water. You can do it yourself with a glass and start rooting and going. Anyways, I don't know. We were talking about it briefly yesterday, and I brought it on both shows yesterday because I had a little China debate. The New York Times posted this article, and I didn't even know about this. And I was like, okay, we're entering the Salamanca parallel to the Walter White Breaking Bad story. I don't know if you know the Salamanca cousins, the twins. They were the badasses on Chapo's 4 children got arrested for fentanyl stuff now, trafficking. So they're presenting that now in the courts. They're really building up this whole cartel story coming from China into the cartels, into the United States. They're going to get that bill signed.
There's a new hook to it, too, where they just charged one of the guys from Charlottesville with trafficking fentanyl.
Well, you got to get the domestic terrorist in there now.
It's from 2021 for people to understand it. He got caught trafficking 33 pounds of fentanyl.
33 pounds of fentanyl.
That's just a little bit.
Let's not forget the obvious, to just quickly lay this out for people, is that the Charlottesville group that is responsible for the rise above, or the march that became the impetus for the Trump MAGA right terrorist perspective, that was the Rise Above movement. The Rise Above movement is the verifiable international arm of the Azov movement, which was created was built and grown by the CIA. It's Project Aerodynamic. It's on the record. So it's interesting to all of a sudden find out that another person who was part of that is weirdly suddenly caught trafficking fentanyl, which is going to be used to push into Mexico. So I just posit the possibility that this is a CIA international operation using these people as operatives. Like, it's not a question to know that that's happening in Ukraine, but to see it pop up on the border when all of a sudden they're now going Mexico bad and invasion, it's just, I find that
such a good story, Ryan. Like, I mean, the opium wars, the way the Brits and the Americans had to sell their drugs in China and had to punish them, and the emperor saw his people addicted on it, so he outlawed it. And what now? So now they're getting us back, and they're using the cartels. I don't know how, they were the Chinese oligarchs were like, they called the CIA and they're like, hey, can we talk to your cartel people too as well? Is that what they did?
Is they called CAA.
Oh,
the casting agency. And they said, look, man, we need to do an Iran-Contra reboot.
Yeah.
We're gonna switch up the script a little bit. Think we're gonna somehow blame the Chinese.
Yes.
So why don't you get a couple of writers on it? Get me J.J. Abrams, and let's put some fresh faces in on this one, okay?
Well, Steve, how do you know that the cartels are still being run by the CIA? Because they fucking told us. It's not even that long ago. Iran-Contra. And then the heroin thing, where the CIA funneled into the pizzerias, to the Italian mob, a bunch of heroin. Like, they told us.
This is an article just from yesterday, this week. It says AMLO has accused the U.S. government of, quote, abusive interference and espionage after the DEA revealed that it had infiltrated the Sinaloa cartel. But I would just add, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't like to make firm if I don't really know what's going on, I'm not going to make a decision. I'm definitely not a China hawk, as you guys say. But it is concerning. There's people publishing, reporters now on the border, and you do see a bunch of young Chinese men coming in through Mexico to the U.S. I've got a friend who's a Peruvian American who used to live here in Mexico. He's a street preacher, and so he preaches on the Texas and Mexico border. And he calls me up a couple months back. He's like, "Dude, there's 1,000 Russians on the border, here in Mexico, trying to get in to Texas, and they're going through the processing centers." So again, I'm
Russian?
not. Yeah. So he
Right.
called me back a couple months back. He's like, "There's 1,000 Russians." He's talking to them using Google Translate. You got Chinese coming in, and so again, I'm not a China hawk, but I think you got to have a balance. Like I do think there could be a plan. I've talked to people on all spectrums. I've had people like Jeff Nyquist on and Trevor Ludon, who are like more China hawks, but I think there could be at some point the potential, if there's a war, Russia and China actually hitting the American homeland, and I think it's something to think about. But the whole Mexico thing, I think they just want to classify narco, as terrorism. They want to classify the cartels as terrorism, just to so they can send troops in. Mexico's already part of NORTHCOM, according to Washington, and so I think it's part of the whole North American Union deal. Because we're already economically with NAFTA, USMCA 2.0. Culturally, we got the next World Cup in 3 years, going to be held in Canada, USA, and Mexico. I think near my home, they're going to have one of the World Cup games here in Guadalajara, and so I think a lot of it has to do with the North American Union. So.
I agree. It's interesting that they're going to hold it with 3 simultaneous countries. That's kind of an indication that we're global now. It's not about one. But what's interesting, though, is that you see Russians down there. I think the bigger picture, first of all, we should in no way dismiss the possibility that this is, in fact, foreign countries trying to flood. I mean, that's certainly possible, right? And that would make sense to a foreign policy agenda, especially to Potts's point, since historically you can, whether it predates the United States, the reality that Western powers had very clearly used opium to control, but let's not forget the U.S. government, Afghanistan, opium, and how that plays too. But it's certainly possible. But what I find interesting is that if you have Russians and Chinese immigrants, and the argument that they're all flooding in through the south border, that it seems like this is an agenda being pieced together now, where you can clearly argue that China is doing this because it comes from China, despite the fact that I think they've on the record said many times that 95% of fentanyl comes to the mail from China, but whatever. But the point
different
being,
chemicals that they're going to be able to grab anywhere and be able to do it in the United States. They can already probably do it in the United States. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, but just the other part of it being that if you have now Russian people coming through, how does that piece together? It does, in my opinion, when you suddenly argue, oh, well, here's a Nazi that just came through, and then arguably that this is being done because Russia is responsible for Nazism in Ukraine, and it all becomes this kind of Russia-China agenda together.
Yeah.
That makes sense with the way they're framing the foreign policy. Just a thought, not saying I can prove the main point there, but I don't know. I'm very concerned about the high level kind of like CIA or just intelligence actions we're seeing played out right now and the way it's being abused. I mean, we know, like to your point about the cartels, like we shouldn't dismiss the possibility that in and of itself is being facilitated, or as you said, the DEA is infiltrated. I mean, everywhere we look, all these events have somebody who is, he was an informant. He was I mean, how about that leaker from the Air Force? You know how he got caught? Somebody in the group spoke to the FBI. It's like, that was probably an FBI agent in that very group. Like that. And now, is that the impetus, or was he just doing his job? I think there's more control, in my opinion.
I think also, though, when it comes to the fentanyl situation, we're not looking at the main causality of the problem, right? Like when we talk about the border, any politician in my mind that's talking about the southern border is doing a disservice, as a distraction. Why are there so much migration coming up in the first place? Exactly. And I always refer to our 82 bases down there that are there for on behalf of the corporations to steal those natural resources. Dole, Chiquita is a great example. Guatemala, how they had nationalized their banana, it was taken away from them because a coup came in. Because we have a history of always supporting the most radical groups out there, and that's what a lot of those right-wing groups are, going back to what we were talking about. But what's the actual causality of the fentanyl situation and the problem in the first place? Well, we have a nation full of addicts. Well, how did they become addicts in the first place? Well, we have a big pharma industry out here that gave away opioids and benzos and Adderall like it was Pez candy. I'm not saying there's not people who need these type of things. I have a subscriber to my channel, one of my favorite ones. She uses opioids on a daily basis because she has major migraines, but she controls it and she needs it and you can use it. But kratom, well, that's another thing we've talked about. But the
I'll
fact
always
is,
fight against opioids work, but that's I know
Cranium.
people that.
And I'm there with you. I'm not in that boat. I don't know. I've always been just a pothead that likes to eat too much food. So my problems are my problems. But the fact is that we have addicts in the first place, and the Sackler families had to pay a lot of money for this. Not a lot of money compared to what they made, but once again, proving the fact that we have an industry which turns our citizens into addicts. Now, you can argue that it's a greater plan that's going on there, that an addicted society is an easier society to control. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't have a need for so much fentanyl, opioids, opium, heroin, all these things, if we didn't have a society that was easily just taking a pill to make themselves feel better. That is where we have to fix the problem right there. Just like when it comes to migration, Lowell, and I said this yesterday, you guys who want a wall, I'll give you the biggest wall, the greatest wall, whatever he said, I'll give you space lasers on it, whatever you want. Just close the 82 bases in Latin America. Let them have their national sovereignty and their resource sovereignty, and I'll give you a fucking wall. That was the compromise I would have made and stuff. So we need to talk about the causality. So fentanyl, schmetanyl, it's bad. It's awful. Let's have a society that's not being drugged out and turning into addicts in the first place.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that as someone who I'm living abroad for almost 20 years, permanently expatriated, and just one thing I learned in Peace Corps Mongolia was that you never really understand your own country, like let's say U.S., until you've lived outside of it, and then you look in from without. Not just for a short time, but for a longer period of time. And then so every time I come back into the empire, I notice these things, and having lived in these different countries, you can see a big difference when you go to the U.S. and people that I know. So many people in the U.S. are either on legal, drugs, substances, or illegal. So pot, cocaine, or they're taking these legal painkillers they mix with alcohol, and that gets them high. And it's like, that's a huge world of difference from other parts of the world. And so it's just to your point, Pasta, it's like, yeah, it's crazy. America is basically like the closest to Brave New World with Soma and all of that. So
I just want to know how a party of individual responsibility doesn't want to take any responsibility for its government's actions, and they want to blame other countries all the time. I'm sorry to interrupt, Ryan. I just wanted to fit that in there because it just drives me fucking crazy.
Well, they blame half of the government. Exactly. And they blame, half of the people, and they blame, 2/3 of somebody's foreign policy because they were taking the wrong money.
Yeah, but we have better management, Steve.
Here's the problem is that there's an unelected permanent state that exists behind the people who walk out on camera and pretend to be our representatives. And we do often get caught up in the surface level emotional drama of it, to where you're like, oh, this person aligns with me on this, and they'll get my vote when we all call in next week. And, oh, I hope this one gets a rose, and oh, I hope this one gets voted off the island, and, all that kind of shit. But at the end of it, they're still actors, and they're still putting on a show for everybody while there's a government that's going on behind the scenes. And yet they might be our only physically identifiable connection to that government that goes on behind the scenes. And that may lead to some of the attachment that a lot of people develop to these Congress critters, because they need to feel like they're vicariously connected to power or something like that. I don't know. I'm just spit, but the problems that the United States faces can't be resolved until the unelected permanent state no longer has the ability to operate with impunity in the dark. And so unwinding the rest of the web of shit, it all stems from that. And really at this point, because, to the points we've all been making about a globalist and the connectivity of it all, without waging significant counter-economic warfare and making something like a CBDC worthless and making something like anything connected to a CBDC totally worthless, that stranglehold is going to continue, because it's not as if that's hyper localized. You can heal your community and you can safeguard it, and that's something you can do on a local level. That's something you can work towards, but there, without having a literal shadow government.
Yeah. Well, I think, and until we can see through the two-party paradigm, we're not even going to begin to get to that level. And these are these different layers. The two-party paradigm is what keeps us pointing at that side. No, it's this side, and we all fail to see it. And you're right, Steve. And we haven't even begun to get into to the masses, to the real crux of the problem. The continuity of government and the obviously parallel structures that we barely even understand, most people anyway. But I want to go real quickly, point out to your point that I'm glad you said that about. It's amazing. When I first traveled outside the United States, I was 18. I didn't live outside, but I traveled outside, and just that, to your point, it really kind of shatters your perspectives when you ask other people about things that you think are just world common knowledge, and they're like, you must be an American. You're like, and you just kind of wake up to it. I didn't immediately think that they must be right and I must be wrong, but you go, oh, so there are other perspectives than what we are told everybody thinks. And it's weird how that opens your mind to, the smaller parts of it, where you get into the little things in our country, and where, even that we think we know these things, but when you really take the moment to break through them, it's a much bigger picture. And I think that's why I think a lot of our the way we're raised, like not to be taught to learn other languages, that we're incentivized to not leave, to, it's more difficult than ever today. And I think that's why. Sort of like stopping us from having dinners with our families every night. They want you to stop exchanging information and learning about other people, especially foreign countries, because we see through their eyes. It's important, I think. Good point.
The wall is to keep Americans in, as Ron Paul says.
Right.
And, I think all this hype about freaking people out about Mexico is also to keep you not going to greener pastures. For some people, you'll find greener pastures in Latin America. For others, it's better to stay in the U.S. And people ask me, well, the security situation, it's not great, but I'm still alive, and everyone that I know is still alive after a decade in Mexico. So how bad can that be? And I was looking at clips from my hometown Chicago this weekend, like absolutely just not. I'm actually fearing for my mother's life in Chicago now.
That's a great point. That's sad. For those who don't know, I think it was something like 3 children died, like 30 something. It was 30 something people. I forget it. The bottom line is that no one talked about it. That's what's crazy. Silence. And except we're hyping up every other thing we can point at. It just shows you that only certain kinds of shootings matter to the corporate media. It's sad.
And on the point about Steve's deep state thing, I think we have a global deep state. You've got a Mexican deep state. You've got an American deep state. I was just looking, in Croatia, you got a deep state. The prime minister is a candidate for next NATO Secretary General. And it's just kind of depressing, actually. Sorry to Blackfield, but you look at the population here in Mexico, it's like so many people still pick their parties and play these party politics. And it's just so hard to get through to them that there exists this parallel structure. So I don't know.
So, we don't need to, though. Like, I truly believe this. If you've already got it figured out, work on building your alternative to the digital prison, because we were talking about this on the Union League. One is last night. We've talked about it here quite a bit. There's always going to be that like soft void in the middle. If you normies, NPs, whatever you want to call it, about right around 2/3, maybe a little less. Let's say 40 to 60%, but enough to be a major impact. So those people have to have an alternative before they're going to do anything, because the current status quo is where their entire world resides. They're not going to leave that for nothing. They're not going to leave that for maybe if I work hard, I can make it, because that's not where nobody has that mentality right now. Or not enough people have that mentality right now. But if you do, And if you're already in a position to where you're like, yo, dude, there's, you're black pilled enough to have the thoughts that you had, just take it another step into that little white pilled space and be like, because I'm aware of these things, I have the opportunity before it does all come crashing down to connect with people who have understood a multitude of the things that I've understood and have different and matching skill sets to mine. And we can now take these things and present an alternative. And if enough of that happens, you don't have to all hold hands. We don't have to all, hang out at the same bar every night. We don't have to. In fact, it would be better if there were decently networked, space in between.
Yeah,
legitimate communities, because that gives other people the opportunity, the soft void in the middle, to go, well, I guess there is something else I could be doing that is viable.
Build it and they will come mentality.
Yeah. I would add just
go ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a really very valid point that they clear. A lot of the average people don't. The truth isn't their motivating factor, right? It's about what makes my life easier, what makes this make sense. And so if you're coming out going, everything you know is false, they're like, well, what else do I do? And you're like, I don't know. They're going to go right back to sleep. It's like that kind of makes sense. But I would argue, and I think we all agree, that it needs to be both. Right. What we're doing here by showing people, giving them that direction for the moment when they do decide to go down that path, that's important too. And I think we all agree with that. But you're right, though, Steve. I think right now is the time of action. We need to see more and more people building alternative platforms, alternative, doctors' offices, alternative, all these different things to where you can go and deal with your necessities outside of the controlled CBDC digital infrastructure direction. I think but we are seeing that, it's interesting to see a lot of, for instance, Catherine Austin Fitz again is that, just talking about that from before, they're working up for Tennessee on a sovereign bank for people. It's outside the structure and they've got a lot of backing for it. I'm going to be looking more into that. So I agree. I think that's important.
It's
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, it's funny down here in Mexico. Like I went to Derek Brose's Greater Reset in Morelia. I've got Alzheimer's. I already forget when that was, like in January or something. And there was an elderly Mexican couple who's Derek used their business for their interpretation, translation service from English to Spanish. And I met them, and they have similar Christian views to the end of the world and the apocalypse. And we just got to talking, and I met them recently in Guadalajara, and they were looking to buy land outside of the city to prepare for whatever it is that's coming. And then just recently, I met a French woman and a Chilean Croatian here in Guadalajara, and they had actually visited one of the other communities. There are different communities outside of Guadalajara. Just for example, there's this uber Catholic community that's already like a bunch of people living together, preparing for the end of the world. And it's just like, there's people doing that stuff. And, it's interesting to be able to talk to all these different people, even, as Steve was mentioning, if they don't have your same exact values, but I think we can all agree. If you're concerned about, if you've got food and water and basically a basic parallel structure, I don't really care, what else you think. So.
Well, I was just going to say before I'm gonna have to drop off, guys, and jump on to my next thing. But it's great. It's great seeing you again, brother. And I always enjoy talking with you. And enjoy the rest of the Tuesday, guys. It's good to see you.
What all you got going on today, Ryan?
I've got a few things. Like, one is a show that I need to get to, but I feel like I've got what else was it? Oh, that's right. I've got a cool an event tonight that I think would be fun. And just kind of speaking to what we're talking about, more community driven overlap. Like reaching out to people around you, action in the real life. This is a group called Make Americans Free Again. So it's kind of, that's the direction. It's not partisan. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, to kind of immerse myself more in this local community. I mean, just even myself, trying to branch out and try to actually get more, fingers in the ground kind of a thing. But the show and I got an article coming up from Robert today and a few other things. But
I think I've interviewed the lady from Make Americans Free Again. What's her name?
I'm not actually sure. Like, I actually just found out of the group through the Children's Health Defense Tennessee fundraiser I just went to. And lot of them were there, and so I think Scott from Rebunked goes, and so I'm going to go for the first time tonight. So I'll say more about it. It seems like a really good, the way it's going forward. I'm glad you interviewed him, because that's the kind of stuff we need more of. These local groups fighting for nonpartisan awareness and medical freedom. It's important.
Pam Popper, that's her name, Pam Popper. Yeah,
that sounds familiar. Yeah,
I had her on TNT. Yeah.
Heck yeah. All right, brother. Well, thanks as always for pulling up on Tuesday.
Thank you, Ryan.
Always a pleasure.
And clear a Tuesday evening over the next couple of weeks, and we'll have you come through Blunt Force.
Yeah. Just let me know which ones you want. I'll put it in my calendar. If it doesn't go on my calendar these days, it doesn't exist.
Tuesday till Tuesday. Remember till Tuesday? Voices carry. You're an '80s guy. You remember that? I know you do.
Oh, right. I'm talking about. Well, just Steve, just shoot me a DM and we'll pick some dates. I definitely want to join. I think it'll be fun.
Okay.
Later,
All right, man.
See you later.
Take care, brother. Ryan Christian Hrvoje, squirrely dog. What are you doing?
Could hear him today.
What are you doing?
He's
Yeah.
being oh.
What are you doing?
Come on up.
Come here. No.
Pasta, were you in Nicaragua recently? Or
I was in Nicaragua 2.5 years ago. I was just in Cuba.
Cuba. Right?
I was just in Cuba.
How was Cuba? I'm thinking of going at some point.
I wrote an article, but I'm stopping. I'm gonna go back and get a little bit more. I was only there for 6 days, and every single one of these trips I go to is life changing. Like you said, you not only do you see another country, but then you understand your country a little bit better because you're outside looking in. And Cuba is one of those countries, very interesting. It's literally a 41-minute plane ride. I don't even think you're in the air 41 minutes. You go up, you come down, they throw snacks at you, pour you water, and then you're landing in Cuba. So it's quick to get there. It's so close. What is it, 90 miles from Key West or whatever it is? So that in itself just gives you a different kind of feeling when you're there. It's like you're very close to home. It's right across that water. But the situations that they're in, and in my article, I cite that it's 90% the United States' fault and 10% the Cuban government's fault. But God forbid, if you on the left, if you say anything, you can try to hold the Cuban government accountable for anything. It's like, oh my God. And all I've mentioned is the fact that they're going to more markets. They're opening up to the Chinese model. The Russia's going to come in there and help them. So they have less than 200, right around 222 sectors of their economy that is private sector. It's mostly controlled by the government, where they're switching around and opening up to 2,000 markets simply because at the end of the day, with the fucking communist system, it's just so many things to manage. It's just not about, ideology. It's like the state trying to manage tourism. That's just, what are you doing? So I think that they recognize that they have to change. They're in a bad situation since the COVID. And they shut down that island too for COVID protocols. Nicaragua was different. When I was there 2.5 years ago in Nicaragua, and we were there during COVID, it was open and running because the government said, the president made an announcement. He goes, Nicaraguans got to eat. Therefore, no lockdowns. We go to work. And I think Cuba should have had that same mentality, but they didn't. And that really hurt them. And it put them in a position now after COVID, supply chains, and a week before Donald Trump left office, he threw the sanctions back on, stripped them again, economically blockaded them more than anything. You know what I'm saying? The fact that Americans can't access their bank accounts, their credit cards in Cuba is terrible. And he also listed them as a state sponsor of terrorism. And that really even further made other countries go, no, we're not going to do any trade with you whatsoever, because they weren't, legally they could do trade, but, the United States is watching. And if you do trade with Cuba, you're on our list. Even in the Restrict Act, out of the 6 countries they mentioned, Cuba was one of those countries. So they, there is some accountability. But for the most part, what America is doing and what Donald Trump did, to appease people like Marco Rubio and Bob Menendez and fucking Senator Cruz, Ted Cruz, it's disgusting because the Cuban people are caught in the middle no matter what, And of course, sanctions are designed to get people to turn against their government. And there's a lot of young people over there that are like, listen, we don't care about the revolution. You can Viva la Revolution your ass out. We want to fucking eat, So, but culturally, then you see too as well, they're the nicest people in the world. They're so awesome. You know what I'm saying? They're fucking just great. Cuba, out of the 6 countries I went to, are the nicest, and there's no homeless people. You never see a homeless person on the street. It doesn't happen, doesn't exist there in Havana. I haven't gone outside of Havana, so I can only speak for Havana. You know what I'm saying? So it's quite interesting. You can see the pros and the cons. But at the end of the day, I think there is a sense for a lot of the Cuban people that want to have a little bit more say in what they can do as far as their economics are concerned. So it's a good thing that the new Cuban government and Diaz-Canel is opening up those markets. So I'm excited for Cuba, but right now they're in a position, they can use a little easing up from the American boot on their neck, and our government shouldn't be doing that. It's ridiculous that they're listed as state sponsor of terrorism. That is just okay. You talk about Mr. Leahy and his shit line. That's way over the shit line, Bobbles. It's just some help can be done on our end. No.
Yeah, I've only met in my life, 2 or 3 Cubans, and one in Mexico some years ago, a lady, and I just asked her. I was kind of pressing her. So, how's life like in Cuba? And I'm sure you meet some of these Cubans like in Florida, and they're like, it sucks. It's a dictatorship. But I met this lady here, and again, a lot of them are conservative. And then we had a good friend, a Cuban friend in Kazakhstan when I was living there in our church, and she was from Cuba, and she ended up, she met the love of her life in the Soviet Union in the 90s and ended up staying in Kazakhstan. And she didn't really have a lot of bad things to say about Cuba. And I think it goes back to that socially conservative thing where it's like, it is what it is. Get on with life. It doesn't really matter what regime we're under, and just get busy living or get busy dying. So
yeah, the thing that's really frustrating is that in Florida you have a lot of Cubans that are anti-government over there, but this is a new guy. This isn't Fidel Castro. This is a whole new dude. He didn't put missiles on the islands, because I do kind of feel like there are 2 countries, no matter what, Haiti being one of them for the Bolivarian Revolution, Cuba being the second one for the Cuban Missile Crisis, that the empire will never, ever lift that boot off that neck. But this guy, he's got to take advantage of that. He's got to say, I didn't put fucking, missiles on the islands. Why are you holding out against me? Let's go. Let's move forward amicably. Let's, have a relationship, because it almost seems kind of impossible in a way that Cuba can't have a relationship with the United States. They're so close. Those people there look at us as brothers and sisters. I know there's a lot of us who don't understand Cuba because we've been told all the bad boogeyman things about it. But if you get a chance to go there, you'll feel totally different. You'll feel connected to these people. Even me as a gringo, feeling connected as can be, barely even can speak the language. And, I witnessed some stuff that was a little hurt, that I didn't like. And, there's some form of humiliation. But there's also some great moments I had. I brought 18 baseballs with me, and I handed them out to the kids in Havana, and just the look on their faces and talking to them. And I was like, hey, Vamos Mets, no Yankees. And we'd have a laugh, and, and they know all the teams, and, you can see a lot of Yankee gear, Met gear, all these, it's just, there's a connection there. And the Cubans that are in Miami, their children, and come on, this is like 60 years ago since this revolution. It's 60 years. Put it behind us, everybody. There's got to be some form of fucking compromise here. I don't know what the politicians in the United States endgame is when it comes to Cuba. What do you want? Well, we want a new government. They got a new fucking government. No, it's the same communist government. Yeah, but it's a different dude. You know what I'm saying? I did say Cuba needs to open up their elections to the international community, which they haven't done. Nicaragua did that. They flooded people in there. They're like, don't come in and just observe, scrutinize. Get your phones out, do whatever you got to do, because they knew what was coming. But, Ortega opened it up to everybody. Cuba hasn't done that. They still got the hand there. They're still very suspicious of the international community, especially American white people coming in. I mean, the CIA has been up there for so long, but that's you have to do that to show that, look, we're representing the people. We're doing it. Hey, we're doing it better than you are. That's what Nicaragua was saying. We got better elections than you, pal. You can't talk jack on our shit. Take a look. So, I mean, that's another thing the Cuban government has failed to do. Get the international community in there for your elections. Point blank.
They're not using Dominion systems.
No. But Venezuela uses Smartmatic. So that's...
How's it when you go to Cuba as an American? Like, you just go on your U.S. passport and they don't stamp it or something like that?
Well, they do, and they look at it and everything. But the whole thing is, you have to have, there's a list of 10 reasons you got to go there. You can't just go there for tourism, right? So you have to have one of the reasons to go there. And it really, to tell you the truth, it was not that hard. I had to fill out a survey on JetBlue because I took JetBlue, and they turned that survey. I had to fill out another. I had to buy my, what do you call it? My visa. for $50 at the airport cash. Here you go. Did I even use cash? I think I used my card. I bought it for $50, whatever it was. So it wasn't that hard. I think you're not allowed to take more than $5,000 with you, which I'll never get close to anyways, and you do what you can do. When you get there, when I got there with some stuff to help, show some love, just baseballs for the kids and mitts for the kids, that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So I brought that stuff with me, but
I can just go on my Mexican passport, so I don't have to do any of that. But I'm just curious, is the internet? I heard the internet's not so good because if I went, I'd have to
sucks.
I'd have to do my
shows.
My TNT radios. No.
Dude, I couldn't stream once. No, dude, the internet situation sucks.
Wow,
sucks. Weak as fucking balls.
Guarantee you, Gitmo's got 5G.
Maybe 6G, but they're probably on 6G now.
We need to get somebody to go over there and take off that 6G. Take it off a Gitmo and send it to the island.
Maybe I can take my Starlink. I got right down
there.
No, my Starlink.
That Starlink sucks, right? I heard it's terrible.
No, it's good actually.
It depends on how many satellites they have up over you. Where I was on the farm in Humboldt, it was like one over a 300-mile radius, and it was just shit internet. It was terrible. If they've got your sky or your lower upper atmosphere saturated with satellites, you'll have good internet. You'll have a good connection. And that was what they were telling us in Humboldt, not realizing that those Starlink satellites are the exact same ones that they've been selling to the Ukrainians for surveillance, that they've been selling to all of these other world governments for actual survey. Yeah, they do. They bounce around a Wi-Fi signal, but they're dual purpose and they're Starlink brand surveillance satellites.
Yeah, I mean, I use it as a backup, and I think it also depends on the country and the coverage. I think El Salvador, recently Haiti got Starlink and El Salvador. But I think for Mexico, the coverage is high from the map. And I got, when I tested it, I got like 50 megs download, which is, great. And I think upload was even 20, 30. But a friend of mine who lives in southern Mexico, like Oaxaca, Chiapas territory, like in the boondocks, he just got the Starlink after I told him, and he's like, it's working great because his internet was sucking out there. He was using, I don't know what he was using, but now he's like, the Starlink, it's amazing. So,
yeah. Well, and I mean, at this point, it's been a year and a half since I was around that internet. So I would assume it's got better.
Haiti needs it because they got Canadian warships going in there right now. So they got to make sure they link up and talk to each other over there. So Canadian forces are getting on the ground first, and now other nations are going to be following behind to remove any type of uprising in Haiti.
I was just going to mention, it feels like we're Back to the Future, because not only Haiti, like another regime change. We were talking earlier. You were talking about Chiquita Banana. I was thinking Guatemala, Operation Peanut Butter. It was like Operation PB Success for Guatemala in 1954. And then 53, of course, TP Ajax for Iran. And this guy's popping up all over the place now. The Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, he just tweeted yesterday he's going to Israel. And it's almost like, and he's talking about taking down the Iranian regime. And it's like, come on. So what you guys were talking about earlier, the CIA script writers, like, you guys got nothing. We're just going to do a sequel of Ajax 2.0. Seriously.
That's it. Stick with what works.
They're doing Gladio 2.0 in Ukraine. So, I mean, why would if it ain't broke? If it ain't broke. Look, all you have to do is just you plug in a little, that maybe you have to swap out a couple of parts. But if you've got a good script, or if you've got a good recurring character, you can basically get people to go along with it, especially if, for example, you don't have that character talk too much, and maybe you just have it get out of a car. This is a little segment in the doc titled Fetty Walking. we're not going to put sound, but this is the return of Uncle Fester. Yo, what up, dog? What up? Yeah, it's how we do on the streets. I mean, you what? You what? That's your senator? That's your senator. Boy, you really didn't like Dr. Oz, huh?
Yeah, it's
What the fuck is that? What the absolute sideways blue-fisted fuck is that?
I've heard. I've had one of my subscribers, I think in my Telegram channel, point this out. I think there's something to this. This goes back maybe centuries. Have you heard of this idea of like the dog king or something? I think we've seen something like this maybe in Game of Thrones or films or TV shows. But it's basically when you're conquered by another party or empire, they put in place some, some imbecile. And it's a way of humiliating the conquered peoples. And I think, you're seeing this a lot in the U.S. specifically because you've got, whoever's the president, Biden now, very much like a dog sort of king. And you just talk about Fetterman. There's so many more examples. He's one of the worst. And someone having studied diplomacy myself in Geneva is like, this is as undiplomatic as you can get. The way they dress, like Fetterman, the way they carry themselves, the way they speak, it's like, what is this? This is not. If I'm going to be a politician, I'm going to be at least, wear decent clothes, suits, try to be somewhat well read, know what's going on. And if I were in his physical or mental state, I would just be upright, like, sorry, I'm not fit for office. See ya. Seriously, like, what are they doing?
So I was saying back in the 2020 primary that I thought that Joe Biden's candidacy, I didn't even think they were going to make him president at that point. I thought the candidacy was a humiliation ritual because he had pissed off the wrong set of elites, or he had, something happened with the hand. But now they've got this guy in full mental decline in an ongoing humiliation ritual every single day that he remains president. They showed you that the American taxpayers were paying for his crackhead son, who's under federal investigation, to travel to Dublin to have a little walkout to the Dropkick Murphys and then be like, hey, Dad, you're going the wrong way. We're over here. So that's an ongoing humiliation ritual because now we're all involved in it because we're funding the entire thing. So sure, is Joe Biden a puppet? Absolutely. Is it at the behest of another government? Are you fucking naive? No, there's no other single government controlling any one individual. We've got the International Bank of International Settlements that is underwriting all of the finances that effectively funds the same handful of bloodline families that internationally have pulled the fucking strings for centuries. We've used political parties for a couple hundred years now. That seems to be running its course. They've certainly ran their usefulness, but there's people that have openly been talking about for years now at the World Economic Forum, at the Chatham House, at these Bloomberg things, that nation states are kind of quaint. We need, a handful of manageable districts. Let's go ahead and, transition the entire continent of Africa from war-torn mining sector to semi-war-torn agricultural sector stroke nuclear facility. You know, and I mean, I don't know. I'll shut up for a second.
No, I think that's where things are going. I mean, they're called technates. I think technates, and I think that we're already in this beta initial phase. So all this political, kind of some of the stuff we've been talking about, like political parties. I mean, I think it's already that's gone. I've had really smart people on my programs, like Gregory Copley of the International Strategic Studies Association. The dude's like in his 70s or 80s, and he's hung out with like diplomats and stuff. And he told me a couple years ago, he's like, the democracy is finished globally. Like the age of democracy is over, period, full stop. We are now entering an age of authoritarianism. He did have some white pill. He's like, democracy will come back again at some point. I'm like, I don't know, but okay. But we're entering technocracy now. You see it everywhere. They're putting out these sorts of politicians. Probably something will happen with them, and they'll be like, look what these guys are doing. We got the AI software is going to run things better. I watched for the first time. Someone suggested Alphaville, this 1965 French movie. That it's a sci-fi film where it talks about the future where the city is run by an AI. There's like no emotions. You're not allowed to ask too many questions. If you do, you're rounded up and executed. And that's kind of like that's what they want to do. They've told us they want a scientific dictatorship, technocracy. You don't need politicians. You just need the scientific experts or the ones that program the software that will run things. Already big tech is already running stuff. Look, the president of the U.S., right, the biggest empire the world's ever seen, the biggest political force, big tech came in, knocked him out of all socials, including his bank account. So they're like, we're running the show now. And so it's like that was like the first shot fired where now we're transitioning into that, I think, technocratic system.
I mean, we've had multiple steps over the last really 30 years that have just sort of kind of inched us into it. And then certainly, we were talking about it a little bit before you got in, but with Ryan, in terms of the, the going direct reset and the merger between the way that the money is printed and banks direct access to that imaginary capital. There used to be a split loop for it. Now there's a closed loop for it. This kind of kicked off in earnest in 2019. This is when Steve Mnuchin was like throwing tens of billions of dollars, approaching hundreds of billions of dollars a day, or at least a month, into Federal Reserve banks, leading up to the CARES Act, which, we've said for a long time. Ryan echoed it today, the largest redistribution of wealth in recorded human history. And it went upward to a handful of fucking psychopaths. Donald Trump really, with a couple of different decisions, brought more like Roosevelt style socialism to the U.S. out of anyone since Roosevelt. And people like give the, it's I don't know, the script versus the reality with these political parties is so fucking hilarious. But people, as we've noted, still fall for that. And look, a lot of this is the fault of what we would call the independent media, because so much of it sticks inside of that team sport shit. It's where the money is. It's where the emotional suckers are, and they'll shell out. That's where the lane is, I guess.
Just on that point, that made me think when you mentioned the independent media, there's some people who've done good work, but some that just keep on banging on that MAGA Trump train, and I'm just kind of like, I'm not really into that, and it's not nuanced, and I think it's just more about grifting and about money. I don't know. I kind of look at it with suspicion now. You got some of these big channels that are still like, MAGA hat wearing, and I don't know. I'm just kind of suspicious about that because I don't think, they're not nuanced and they're getting further from the truth. I mean, how can you still be on the MAGA Trump train? I don't know.
The exact same way that you've got the freaking bubbleheads on the opposite side who are still like kind of making a case for Bernie.
Run again.
Yeah, like that thing's still there. They got a couple of other just absolute freaking Muppets that they'll talk about every once in a while. They're trying to make, some sort of famous or whatever. And but it's all that same grip. They just never really had, like, Bernie was the closest thing they were going to get to a Trump-like figure anytime sort of soon. And there's just nobody really in that space that's going to be able to do it. So they've got to try to attach other people to that guy, or they've got to try to keep, like bringing him around until he finally pulls an Elvis and somebody finds him on the toilet one day.
Who, Corn Pop? Nobody's going to follow Corn Pop? Nobody. Yeah.
If y'all had to vote, least worst, who would it be? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at this point, or what?
I don't. Who all else is available? I mean, seriously, like, is this an actual presidential ballot where you get an additional, handful of other, like, anywhere from joke to semi-joke candidates and the option to write in someone? Because if we're doing this traditional ballot style, I've got lots of other people that I mean, I'm not going to tell the dude to not run. I think doing it inside of the Democratic Party is a great way for the Democratic National Committee to make a crap ton of money off of unwitting donors, But if it gets, look, if the last 3 to whenever he actually starts doing candidate stuff, 4 years, haven't made people question things, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s candidacy does, then that's where hopefully the next base or the next like new wave of people coming into looking at the alternative parallel structures, counter economy that we've already been building, that's where those people will come from. And that's cool. And I'm not trying to shit on the people who are going to benefit from hearing new information for the first time. I think the mechanisms by which he's doing it are shit. And I think that the compromises that have already been made in order to get to that spot are insurmountable once on the off chance that he would receive a nomination. But
I can say,
again, what I'm saying, I don't want that to now be interpreted as, I guarantee it will be, as Steve thinks anyone who learns anything from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an idiot or some shit like that. Go fuck yourselves. Jesus Christ, grow up. Have some fucking nuance. Listen with both ears. Take the dick out of one of them. You're gonna need both.
I was going to say, take the dick out of your ear. I was going to say that, I don't think I have a choice for president, but there is a candidate running that I am excited for. I don't think he has a chance to win, but he can change the conversation. That is one Derek Brose, who is running for Houston mayor, and that's awesome that he's being able to change the conversation and implement new ideas. I think he realizes that the system itself, even if he was able to build a movement in Houston where a lot of people would get out in the streets with him, the voting mechanism itself is captured, and he probably has no shot of ever, winning because of that alone. However, him changing the conversation and him being able to implement the ideas and, getting a chance, because for some reason people do pay attention to they wouldn't pay attention to Derek Rose, the journalist, or Derek Rose, the activist and stuff. But Derek Rose, the mayor candidate, he's going to reach a whole different group of people. So I am excited for him and what he's been able to do. And yeah, that is one candidate I like. So.
I was thinking actually about that recently, his motivations, kind of what you said, that it doesn't seem like he's ever going to win, but I guess it is a win if you change the conversation. And it's a long process. Like, it's kind of like what Ron Paul did to many of us, where he smashed us in the face, with some of these ideas. And then that led to the subsequent generations heading in that direction. And so, yeah, good. I couldn't have the nerve to do what Derek's doing. And by the way, I don't know if you saw him recently asking a question to Tulsi Gabbard, and I would not be as well composed as he is. I think he does a great job. And I don't know, Tulsi, for me, I felt like she was a bit elitist. Like, I've only got 30 seconds, and she was kind of standoffish. And I'm like, I'm the kind of person, I'll talk to everyone, I have this kind of like vibe. And yeah, that was interesting.
That's who she used to be, that I'll talk to everybody. That, she would have, when she wasn't getting a lot of attention in the beginning, she'd have events and she'd have a press gaggle in the back of the room at the end of the event and take questions from anybody at any time. Now she's being hesitant, putting up more barriers, doesn't want to ask me questions. You can see the person like she's running to another thing, and her answer was kind of shit. I mean, she can get a better answer for that one. She's just a totally different person now. But, listen, sometimes when you win, you lose. And sometimes when you lose, you win. If you lose the race because you didn't acquiesce to any party or their ideas and whatnot, and you stayed true to your principles, then even though you lost the election, you actually won. And I told these other people that I know, some of these old grassroots people that are still running for office when I recently spoke to them, I said, well, you might win the election, but you lost because you're acquiescing and you're bending the knee. You're saying to me, I have to do these things because I want to win, right? I want to win, so I have to do this. Well, no, now you're going to lose because you're going to lose support. You're going to lose your principles. Therefore, you lost, even if you do get that seat, because they'll only give it to you because you're going to be a puppet and you acquiesced. So Derek Rose is going to lose, but the election, but he's going to win the hearts and minds of a lot of people and change the conversation. And that's the most important thing.
I've thought of, just for fun, being a naturalized Mexican citizen, if I were to run for a political office here. I'm not sure if I can, because I read because I studied diplomacy. I think I looked up if whether I could serve in the Mexican Foreign Service, and they said no, because if you're naturalized, you can't. So I don't know what limits I have to running for politics. I'd probably get taken out by the cartels because I'd be trying to do the right thing. But someone who might be interesting for you guys to have on. I've had him on my podcast in TNT. Emmanuel. I don't know if you've heard of Emmanuel Pastrich, but he's lived in Asia. He studied at Harvard, and he's running for president. He's like an independent candidate. He's got this Substack, and it's just kind of interesting, his views. But I found that he had one of the best analyses of what happened with COVID. I was blown away by his Substack, and he was basically saying that we've got these, when people say it's like China trying to take over the world with technocracy, it's like, no, you've got it all wrong. You've got these international IT companies, international finance and transnational corporations. I've had William Robinson on, who's great. You probably have him if you haven't, a professor. And so IT corporations and private military intelligence companies, and they're the ones that are working with all the governments, including China. And so China's like, oh, this happens. Like, what do we do? We'll just outsource our thinking to these companies, and these companies tell them, okay, do the PCR tests and lockdowns, and so it's not like any one nation driving this. It's an international force, and then it's up to the nations who decide. Like you said, Nicaragua was like, no, we're just gonna keep things open. Or Lukashenko in Belarus, who said, IMF and World Bank came to me and they said they'll give me a bunch of money if I lock everything down. It's like, I'm not doing that. And so, anyways, he's interesting because he's running for a president. I think he said himself he's not going to win, but he's doing what you said, that he's going to stick to the principles. So
that's the whole thing. And you don't lose in my mind, then you win. And that's the problem. But, and I've seen that in a lot of elections. I'm kind of curious, while we get a chance to talk about this, the leaks that came out. The leaks, right? A lot of people thought they were full of shit. Somebody on your on your platform, your network, TNT, Patrick Henningsen, one of my favorite guys. Love talking to this dude. Got to meet him at the Rage Against the War Machine rally and whatnot. He sent me a tweet of his he did with Samantha Powers, talking about pretty much we're letting up all these agencies come in. This, Nestle and whatnot. And who wants to be a part of the new Ukraine, right? And these are the things I think the fourth industrial revolutionists, some of us, believe that the leaks were a way of providing an off-ramp and getting out of there, and being fine with the territory chopped up the way it was, maybe seeing that was, that's what they expected anyways. I don't think that realistically that NATO going in there thought they were going to be able to hold on to the Donbass and hold on to Crimea or get Crimea back. I think they realized this is what it was about. It was more about an existential war of sorts, right? NATO against Russia. And that's what was going on over there. But now I think it's an off-ramp. Now, Mark Sloboda was on my show, and Mark Sloboda says that he doesn't think it's an off-ramp. He thinks it's more about the domestic policies that they're trying to implement. A lot of us also agree that, hey, well, what are you going to do to stop these leaks to getting out, Mr. Colonel, Major, whatever you are, douchebag of the military, of all the jerk-offs that answered him? Well, we have to get better at this. Well, we have the Restrict Act sitting right over there. So now we can lock down on even more shit with these leaks coming out. So, but so that is the question, because obviously we think there's going to be a pivot to China, right? China. Mark Sloboda thinks that they're crazy enough to do both wars on both ends because it's different type of wars, and maybe that's possible. But I think that they want to kind of turn Ukraine into one of these 15-minute cities, these technocratic countries and whatnot. So I think there will be a pivot and a off-ramp out of there. Samantha Power, and once Steve comes back, we'll be able to play it. Samantha Power was just out there, USAID, talking about, in the tweet, Patrick said, look at them dicing up Ukraine as if it's a piece of Uncle Sam's American pie. Steve, in the bottom of the doc underneath the StreamYard link, I have that Samantha Power video. And this is why I do think, I think why people like Patrick Henningsen's mind's there. Steve said there was going to be an off-ramp. I think there's going to be an off-ramp because I think they have plans for Ukraine. They've always been hinting at it. And Samantha Power goes there and she starts talking about, who wants to be part of this new Ukraine? We're going to be slicing and dicing. We already got this guy coming in there, this guy coming in there. Steve, if we can throw that up real quick and play that. Sorry, no. I want to get your opinions.
Yeah. In the interim, you can play Zelensky in drag or playing piano with his penis or something.
As you consider the potential opportunities in Ukraine, I would urge you to think of them in terms of the innovation risk curve. We are in that early stage now when an opportunity holds promise, but it is unknown and many fear it is too risky. But the early adopters take the odds, push reform, secure reform with us, and will benefit enormously. By investing in Ukraine, you can join companies like Kingspan, Nestle, and Bayer in the group of early adopters. You can invest in Ukraine's future, and in doing so, you will be investing in democracy's future. Please know that as you do, USAID and our partners around the world plan to offer our full support.
She just looks creepy.
I was just gonna say that she looks like
looks fucking creepy.
But
she looks like Fire Marshal Bill, the Jim Carrey character from the hit comedy sketch show In Living Color.
But I mean, there's a lot there that you said to unpack. But I kind of view it as maybe the leaks are legitimate, but it's a false flag to play into all the things that you're saying, so that very well could be an off ramp. By the way, Mark Sloboda, like over the years, twice I've got his email. I've invited him on. I never got a response. And next time you talk to him, tell him go on Hrvoje's show. I think
he still has me blocked on Twitter.
Seriously?
I don't even know why. Yeah. I have no idea. I don't ever recall ever having an interaction period with Mark Sloboda.
Yeah, I mean, he does good. I follow him for years, but I mean, just to go to what you're saying, I think part of it's to bring in, it's a false flag to bring in the Restrict Act, Patriot Act 2.0, shut us down. You had the global war on terror and, going after foreign terrorists. And now part 2 is the domestic war on terror to come after us. I was shocked when last year the way I've interpreted my banning from PayPal, the same week they rolled out this Information Governance Board. So it's coming out now. There was actually the DHS with its sub-agency CISA, and basically they classified people like myself and MinPres and Consortium as non-kinetic threats, and that we were actually threatening the cyber infrastructure of the U.S. government. And so they told PayPal to shut us down, which that's like crazy. That's like one step away from being enemy of the state. And now Restrict Act is coming in. But what they want to do with, there's some people have been talking about, I think globalists have different scenarios, and maybe one of their plans, they've written about it, foreign policy recently, like a Polish, Ukrainian, Lithuanian union. So that might be one of their goals, to sort of like create this new regional mini union. But I also something that's interesting that I just discovered, what you're talking about. It's like what they did in Iraq, right? Go in, bomb the place, and then have Halliburton and Bechtel rebuild everything. That clip you just played. So I found a white paper from 2013, 10 years ago, I think IMF white paper, and a lot of it featured the head of China's central bank, PBOC, I think. And they were discussing how to bring in the one world currency. What the IMF has dreamed about since the beginning. Keynes called it the Bancor. And in the paper, it talks about another iteration is the Unitar. Isn't it funny how the IMF just brought out the Unicoin? And then basically they're saying that they want the IMF special drawing right to be the world reserve currency. But the problem is they've got to get countries to start using it. And in this paper from 10 years ago, it actually says, we can do things like issue SDR bonds to European countries that they then use for building infrastructure, energy, transport. And then I find from two weeks ago, IMF note about how they're sending, I don't know, like 11 billion in SDRs to Ukraine to rebuild their infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So it's like what they're doing is they're now introducing the SDRs because they need to get them into circulation to then become eventually the one world currency. And so I think there's a lot of things at play, geopolitical, economical. And so something that I haven't seen anyone yet talk about is this IMF SDR factor in the Ukraine issue. And then, there's the issues with the regional union option as well, whether they want to pull out of Ukraine or just keep things going. So
if they want to have that type of world where people are coming in and getting foreign investments, it's got to be secure. There has to be an off-ramp for that to happen. If there is constant civil war going on, or whatever you want to call it, NATO versus Russia, they're not going to get the investment. So that's at least the way I feel. That's why I felt differently than Mark, and I felt along the way. I think with a lot of other people like Patrick and Steve, they definitely need an off-ramp now. After seeing that confirmed my suspicions, because we did hear a lot of things about, we saw, I think Steve brought a video about 8 months ago about Ukraine being this new 15-minute city, and it's a digitalized city, and it's everything that you can think that they want for the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset. This is it right here. What better place to do it in Ukraine after it's been destroyed? Build it back in your own image.
And just to add to that, I thought I'd mention one of my past TNT guests. He's got a Twitter account, which is great, called Peasant Journalist. And he picks out all these little, maybe you know him, or but I think he
I follow that account.
He's been on my TNT, and he picks out these little clips that are great. And so he posted a quote from this 1971 book called Building the City of Man, Outlines of a World Civilization by this professor Warren W. Wagar. And once I saw You can get it on archive.org, but I'm like, I got to have the physical copy of this book. And I just, the first used copy I could find was like $50. I'm waiting for it in the mail. But it basically, this professor talks about the coming world states and how they're going to have like a third world war, but it's not going to be like a total war, like some nuclear apocalypse. It's going to hit hard in certain regions. And then that this global technocracy, what they're going to do, they're going to use the impact of that through propaganda to kind of twist people's arms into accepting, supranational, or world government. And then separately, we're seeing all this talk about smart cities, 15-minute cities, as you mentioned. I mean, I just discovered yesterday they're going to have Smart City Expo in Yucatan here in Mexico next month. So they're going to have this whole Smart City Expo about how they're going to bring in these smart cities. And it's happening everywhere, here in Mexico, in Ukraine, US, all over the place. And so I think, as you say, Pasta, that, maybe they're finished with Ukraine. They're going to pull out and they're going to start rebuilding it to help bring the IMF SDRs, rebuild Ukraine towards the smart city option. Maybe they'll then pivot to Taiwan or China. But I think I think there will be some sort of conflict, maybe tactical nukes used in some areas. And then they might then, after that, try to herd us into the 15-minute cities in our different respective countries.
Well, there's a number of different things that can happen, and this is shit that, I mean, I don't know. We've kind of hopefully laid it out like pretty clearly, because it's not just 15-minute cities. There's been all of these different environmental disasters. There's been all of these different unnatural, oh shit, we had to blow up the train. Oh, look, there's more, that fell into this waterway. Oh, well, this thing is now, Lake Mead doesn't have water anymore. Lake Powell doesn't have water anymore. And you've got there's forced relocation being done by literal poisoning and direct assault on. So this motherfucker, I swear to God, dude, it's like they pay him to pin the fucking throttle. Like,
it's the CIA.
Not even to fucking move leaves around. Not even to do that. And they park the goddamn wood chipper like in the handicap spot directly by there's like one fucking nuts, dude.
It's the feds messing with you.
I swear to Christ. This happened. This, I think, was the feds. I was in DC for an Assange thing, and it was a Sunday, and I had Whitney on the show, and like, I mean, quite literally 3 minutes into the interview, this landscape crew pulls up. A whole bunch of people get out, and they're just running as many power tools as they possibly can, gas powered equipment as they possibly can, for the entire time. The second I got up, they rolled up and left.
Steve, they're just using their gas powered garden tools before we switch completely to electric. You got it all wrong.
I mean, this was 2020, and it was in Washington and D.C., and it had nothing to do with Gavin Newsom or the legislation in California, but it could be related. It could be. I will get out the cork board and the red string, and we'll see if we can't make it work.
But just to add to what you were saying, Steve, yeah, they're using so many more excuses, and I'm reading in the mainstream Mexican papers here now, like they're just using all kinds of, like, here in Guadalajara, we got a forest and it's burning all the time, and it's actually polluting the air. Like, I can smell it when it burns from my home, and it's nasty. I got to close the windows. But they're going to use anything that they can, whether it's war. I don't know. I don't think I mentioned it this time today, but over the weekend, one of my Mexican bank apps updated, and now when I go in, it's got my carbon footprint. It's calculated my carbon footprint at 20,000 pesos, $1,000. And so, yeah, they're going to say, you like in Mexico City, some days you can't drive with your car. So they're going to say pollution, this, war, that, climate change, that, pandemic. And yeah, it's death by 1,000 cuts, basically.
So there's a couple of things that I think I'd like to jump to before we get out of here. wanted to talk a little bit because it is semi-related to all of this other stuff. Parler getting the axe.
Again?
Well, I mean, shut down. The app sold, and then it was closed down.
That really was a shame, though, and it was unfair the way they got shut down to begin with. It really just kneecapped the fuck out of them. I'm gonna grab coffee real quick.
All right.
I never used Parler, but I don't know what the game is here that they just want to shut down competition or what.
Right. So the purchased by media conglomerate Starboard shut the app down completely to undergo a strategic assessment. Let's see. Company statement immediately takes a strong stance on the spirit of the platform, saying no reasonable person believes that a Twitter clone just for conservatives is a viable business anymore. Okay, that's fair. Let's see. Company praised now former CEO George Farmer for his focus on cloud storage, IT infrastructure, says new owners will use advancements in AI technology, along with other new features to begin servicing unsupported online communities. Team of Parler has built an exceptional audio, Parler asset remains okay. Yeah. So shut down for good. May come back with AI as a what? He will. I don't know. That sounds hanky.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent example, I read Amazon just bought another independent book repository, and then as soon as they bought it, they shut it down. So it's kind of like maybe this is one of those type of things. And AI, Gab recently, I just use Gab to post my stuff, but they just when I logged in one of the last times, they've got an AI thing. So right there in your Gab account, you can just type in the AI chat words and it'll create these AI images. So yeah, but I don't know how popular Parler was. I mean, people are using Twitter, and then the alternatives are like what Truth, and people are using Truth Social and Getter, and yeah, I don't know.
And then they tried all of the shit libs found out about Mastodon for 10 minutes, and then found out that Mastodon was full of equally horrible people.
It's so cringe. I mean, there one cybersecurity expert that I follow for years, Brian Krebs, and then he announces I'm going to Mastodon because Elon Musk took over, and then he's no longer tweeting on Twitter, and I'm like, what a bunch of losers! Seriously, what about?
How dare you call me state-funded media? I'm leaving. And then and look, because Elon is a troll, and because here's what sucks, man. The whole meme that the left can't meme, it's accurate. And because the left can't meme, they set themselves up always to get trolled. Because Elon Musk has some sort of ultra level autism, he's been able to occasionally get a few zingers in. And so the Canadian Broadcasting Company, he put a state-funded media tag on him, or state-affiliated media, or something like that. The Canadian Broadcasting Company made a big stink out of it. They were like, dude, you suck. Why would you even say that to us? We are not even we're not even 70% funded by the Canadian government. So because Elon Musk is a child, because it's an easy joke, he did this. So made the correction.
Yeah, I mean, he's making technocracy cool and fun. He's
right.
sugarcoating things. I'm gonna have to go because I think I have a podcast interview in 20 minutes. The guest hasn't confirmed. So it's one of those like, are they going to show up or not? So yeah, it's super cool. I'm happy to drop in anytime, and I'm happy to have you guys on TNT anytime.
Yeah. Well, let everybody know where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Geopoliticsandempire.com. People don't use Google search engine. If you type it in, I'm blacklisted on Google search, which is crazy. And TNTradio.live. So that's about it.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I had a great day. I always have a good time talking to you. Always have a good time. Do come back through. And one of these times, because your show starts at
6 p.m. No, 7 p.m. Central US. Yeah.
Okay, so if it starts at 7 p.m. Central US, the first hour of the Union of the Unwanted is 6 p.m. Central. So it's a come as you are type thing. And you could definitely at least hang out for 25, 35 minutes on the front end, still go get yourself a beverage, do whatever you need to do before your show, get in a chair and come back on.
I think that's because of the time change now. I didn't realize that because Mexico's the first year. This is so awesome. AMLO or whoever changed the law where we're no longer doing daylight savings. We're not changing our clocks anymore. That's why Central Mexico is 1 hour different from Central US now. So yeah. So I feel healthier already without the clock change. So
I thought it was like a labor thing so they can get more labor in with the daylight saving thing. That's
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
we found a workaround, and that's the important thing.
Just leave it the fuck be, right?
Is Union every week or when is that?
It's every other Monday.
All right. Yeah, I'll shoot a message to Ricky V. All right. Well, keeping on. Cool stuff. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Maybe get you guys back on my show as well. So
Hrvoje, thank you so much.
Hasta la vista.
Peace. Take care, brother.
See ya. Bye.